Hello, everybody. I might kick off in this spirit of starting on time and finishing on time. I'd just like to welcome you all. I know we have people joining us from all over Australia. Thank you for taking the time on a Tuesday night to enjoy this incredibly interesting and important conversation that we're going to have with our impressive panel tonight. So before I start, I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. I'm Linda Swan. I'm the CEO of Go Gentle Australia, and we're putting on this webinar as part of an Australian-wide initiative to support the incredible work that's being done to promote conversations around the end of life. So this is part of a Dying to Know Day event. There'll be a number of them happening around Australia today. And this is Go Gentle's contribution. And what we'd like to talk to you about tonight, or share with you tonight, is conversations about death and dying, particularly intergenerational conversations between different generations. And in particular tonight, we're going to focus on voluntary assisted dying and how you can have conversations about voluntary assisted dying and the importance of having those conversations between different members of families. So before I start, I also wanted to acknowledge that as we're joining from all over Australia, we're all coming to this conversation from different lands. And so I'd like to make a broad acknowledgement of the lands from which we all come from all over Australia and pay my respects to elders, both past, present and emerging. For the Go Gentle team, we work on Gadigal land, but I know that you come from all the lands around Australia. So thank you for joining us tonight. I'd like to start with some quick introductions. I know that the people that are joining our webinar tonight will be engaging and you'll quickly learn to love them. But to start off with, I'd like to introduce Mitch Warnock. So Mitch is here because he's had an experience of supporting his mother, Jan, as she chose to have voluntary assisted dying at the end of her life. And the way she wanted to end her life was with a big party. And I'm sure, Mitch, that involved some really interesting conversations with the family about how they'd deliver on your mum's wishes. So it'll be great to hear about those. Sarah's joining us all the way from the UK. So we've got an international star joining us tonight. And she's originally from Adelaide. And she has a really interesting story about how she and her brother supported her dad's wish to end his life. Unfortunately, at the time, there wasn't voluntary assisted dying laws, so she and her brothers went with him to Switzerland. And again, I'm sure, Sarah, there were some really interesting conversations about how the hell do we make that happen. And finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Carolyn Lawler-Smith. Carolyn is also from Adelaide. She's a GP of over 40 years, but she was instrumental in the passing of the voluntary assisted dying laws in South Australia. She is doing a lot of voluntary assisted dying work. She's one of the earliest voluntary assisted dying practitioners and has recently been awarded a recognition for her support in the community with a AOM medal. So congratulations on that, Carolyn, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So welcome. It's going to be a really interesting discussion, but I thought, Sarah, I might just start with you because I think you've got an interesting tale to tell. Can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up supporting your dad's end of life and, you know, a little bit about maybe the conversations that occurred to get you there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, crazy. So my dad had motor neuron disease and yeah, it just completely rocked his world. It started with you know, he wasn't able to run anymore, and then he wasn't able to walk, he wasn't able to do things that he loved, so playing golf, wasn't socializing as much, everything that he loved doing basically got stripped from him until he couldn't do those things anymore. Yeah, it was just really, really hard. For those that don't know much about the disease, basically it strips you of your independence. So basically your muscles just deteriorate to the point where they stop working, and really sadly the way that you pass away from that is, yeah, there's some photos there, is you end up choking basically. So my dad didn't want that to happen to himself. He's a very independent person, really social, loved seeing his friends, like I said, playing golf, really, really active at his age. Like, he'd always have comments saying, you know, I can't believe like you're the age that you are. And yeah, it just was awful seeing him deteriorate the way that he did. He ended up in hospital after a pretty bad fall one night. So, you know, he wasn't able to use his body for quite a while. And he rapidly declined then too. So everyone's progression with MND is really different, and the way that it affects them as well. So some people, it affects their speech. With my dad, it has more affected his legs, and then it was coming to his hands and his arms. So he wasn't obviously being in hospital, he wasn't using that at all. And he was just bedridden. So, you know, apart from like the 15 minutes a day that you get with physios. So that meant that his decline rapidly increased as well. And he was just really, really sad. He was really unhappy. He was having a really, really hard time. And I think for Dad, he actually knew prior to him being in that situation that, you know, he knew what was coming with him. With MND, it's unfortunately the inevitable is that you're going to pass away. There's no cure. The treatment's really not progressed very well either. So he knew that for him it meant that this was the route that he was going to choose. So he had the conversation with my brothers and I that he was interested in doing this, and unfortunately it was available in South Australia at the time, and it wasn't going to be passed, I think, for about another 18 months from memory. So he had actually found, there we go, that's in the middle of winter in Switzerland, these photos. So yeah, he had actually found that there was an organisation, there was actually 2 organisations in Switzerland that do voluntary assisted dying. And yeah, he had the really hard conversation with my brothers and I that that's what he wanted to do. And we were completely supportive of him and his decision. We knew, you know, what was going to happen. We knew where he was going. We knew how sad he was. He was a really different person from the dad that we knew, being like a really energetic, upbeat, happiest, most social, like life of the party person, to then being rocked with this disease, and that just completely stripped him of everything that he knew and loved. So yeah, we were really supportive of him. It also, I think, something that's really important to note with MND and many awful illnesses is that it doesn't only affect the person that is battling with the disease, it also affects everyone around them. And my mum actually passed away a few years prior to Dad, so it meant that it was just my brothers and I who were supporting and caring for him ultimately at the end of the day. And he was also quite stubborn, and he didn't want a carer. So you know, we knew that just would have rocked him even more. So we helped as much as we could. There you go. That's when he got a hole in one, the golf course. So yeah, we were there to support him in every way that we possibly could, and our lives were completely changed as well. So, you know, I was 26 and my life was not reflective of a 26-year-old. My brother was raising a young family. My other brother's working full time, and we were all trying to support Dad, and everything was just really, really difficult. So we knew that it was only going to get worse for him and us as well. So yeah, we were really, really supportive of him. And it was a crazy journey where it was in the middle of COVID that we went to Switzerland in the middle of winter. And yeah, it was just crazy. Crazy is probably the word to describe it. Yeah, even when I speak of the story and I tell it, I find it hard to it still shocks me, and I think I can't believe that actually happened, and that was where we were, and that was a situation that we were all going through.
Thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate you sharing that story, and it must be hard every time, you know, because you sort of got to remind yourself of how difficult it was, and we appreciate it. It's really interesting you use the words Dad had the hard conversation with us. Were you shocked, or were you really quite prepared for the conversation when it happened?
Oh, it's hard. I don't think it's something that you're ever going to be prepared for. We knew what was happening anyway. We knew that he was dying. It was just in a different way. And we knew that that probably wasn't too far ahead. It kind of went from bad to worse with him being in a hospital, and he suffered some health complications there too. So we knew what was happening, but it was just, yeah, we didn't think it was going to be as soon as it was. But I think knowing, the way that he explained it and the way that it was what he wanted, and just knowing our dad before and then knowing where he was and what he was going through, it just felt like, yeah, it just wasn't, it's hard to explain. We were just all very much on the same page. I think we're really lucky in that too, that my brothers and I were all on the same page and supportive of dad. So yeah, I think when you're in the moment, you're kind of in survival mode too, and you know that's what I guess is his decision, and for the best for him and for us. And we were just we're a really close family, so yeah, for us it was just like, we're not going to fight him on that. We'll be there if that's what he wants to do. Obviously it's really hard and it doesn't make it easy, but yeah, if that's what he chose to do and that's the way that he chooses to end his life, then we're there every step of the way. I think one thing, with MND, they call it the beast. It completely strips you of your dignity, and that's not what he wanted. So yeah, we were like, yep, your independence is stripped of you if you get to choose one thing and that's how you end your life in the way that you want to, then like, go, yeah, good on you.
It's it's a cruel and horrible disease, and I think one of the cruel things is that you're sort of aware for so long that it's
Well,
going.
yeah, that's the thing. Your cognitive, like your mind is aware of what's going on. You just have no control of anything else that's happening. And yeah, you're the same person inside. You know what's going on, but unfortunately, your body's just fighting against you.
Sarah, it's an incredible story, and Danielle from our team just put up a link because you've provided more details and stories previously. So we really appreciate your openness.
Of course, I think it's really important to talk about.
Sorry, Sarah. Mitch, your mum had a different sort of experience, or you had a different experience, and in your case, you were able to access assisted dying. But you still probably had difficult conversations with your mum when she was it the same similar sort of story where your mum said to you, "This is what I want"?
Well, we were actually taken back a little bit by mum because she'd been battling cancer for around about 20 years plus. And then she came good for a while there, and everything was starting to look really well. And then all of a sudden, towards the end there, we noticed she started getting really, really frail, and was sleeping a lot. So me and my brother only really found out a week before she actually wanted to do it. So that was pretty hard on both of us, taking all that in and realizing we've only got one more week to be beside our beautiful mum.
Right.
And yeah, it was quite tough. My brother didn't take it very well. And we sort of sat down together and had a good chat and just said, look, mate, we're lucky to have mum as long as we have. She's obviously in pain. It's her life. If this is what she wants to do, and all I could do is just go up and give mum a big cuddle and just say, look, mum, I got your back on this. If this is what you want to do, I'll back you 110%. I know I would want you around forever, but I could just see how much pain was in her eyes and just how she was just sick of just fighting that terrible disease for so long. Yeah, I miss her so much every day. But yeah, she's such a brave woman to be able to, and such a beautiful thing for her to be able to take that in her own strides and make her own decision when she wanted to leave this world. So yeah, so we had a little bit of a party for her the night before she left. So, but she was always the party girl and always had a good time, always had a gin and tonic in her hand. And yeah, we got to send her off in the way that we all wanted to and that she wanted to. So yeah, it was a beautiful night for everyone.
And Mitch, did you ever have any trouble telling friends about your mum's plans or having conversations with other people?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing was my brother and I, we work together, and we've got 5 guys that work for us. I think sitting down with those boys and just being like, look, this is what happening, and they were just absolutely shocked. Like they didn't even know anything was wrong with mum, because yeah, she was pretty stubborn too. Like she didn't want to tell anyone, or um, yeah. So it was definitely a shock to everyone. I didn't really know what it was at the start when I first heard about it. Um, but yeah, after sitting down and talking to her about it, I think it's a really good thing that if you're in that much pain and you need to let go and do it in your own time and around your friends and family in your own space, I think it's a beautiful thing to do.
Was there anyone that really was unsupportive of your mum's choice?
Um, Not really. My uncle, her brother, was a little bit because he's quite religious. Um, but apart from him, that was everyone else was just like, we feel for you, Jan, and um, they were just so proud of her and how brave she was, and how long she actually fought the disease for. So yeah, it was quite tough growing up as a kid watching your mum really, really struggling. She'd have bad days, she'd have good days. And then, yeah, just in the end, just seeing how frail she was, I was just like, even the doctor said she probably wouldn't have lasted another week or 2 weeks. So, yeah, I think it's good that she was able to leave on her own terms. Yeah.
It's interesting, both Sarah and Mitch, you've told stories of how you were supportive of your loved one's wishes, but it was still sad and hard.
Yeah.
And I'm sure afterwards it's sad and hard.
Mm.
And I'm sure having conversations with people and support from people, not only in the lead up to the death, but afterwards is incredibly important. Did either of you find that you had a network or a friend or someone that you'd talk to about what you'd been through? How did you cope, Sarah, afterwards?
Yeah, I'm very open and I'm happy to tell everyone. Sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe don't tell everyone and everything about your whole life. But so I find it very easy to talk about these things. For me, that's one way to deal with it. So I felt comfortable talking to people, and like I said, I'm really close to my brothers, so we it's hard to talk about, not an easy conversation to have, but yeah, I can definitely lean upon them, and likewise them for me. So I think also having lost our mum, that's just brought us even closer. So I'm very, very lucky to have a really beautiful relationship with them. My brother actually lives here. I'm in the UK. He lives here as well. So we're really lucky to have each other here. In terms of friends, I've got a really beautiful network as well. There were definitely a few of my inner circle that I really heavily leaned upon. And then they were really amazing in kind of telling the wider circle of friends to avoid me having to kind of go through that again. So I would definitely lean upon them a lot, and also just wider family, like my yeah, aunties and uncles and grandparents. So yeah, everyone is super supportive with us, and yeah, I've been super, super lucky to have such a beautiful family. I think definitely hadn't told like everyone. It was almost something that we thought we not as necessarily a secret as such, but we just didn't want to, I guess, burden people with it. So we didn't really talk too much about exactly how Dad passed away. We just thought people actually presumed or maybe had heard about how. It actually wasn't until sharing the story through Go Gentle not very long ago that a lot of people that I actually thought knew how he passed away in Switzerland had said, oh, I had no idea. And these people that are quite close to me. So I thought it was just really important as well to share, you know, for some people to know a bit more about you and why you are the way you are, and what my dad went through, and just to feel open to talk about these things as well and just open the conversation. So yeah, very interesting, a very, very interesting experience for sure.
What about you, Mitch? Did you have a support network?
Yeah, I did. My beautiful partner or fiance, she lost her father at quite a young age as well when she was 21. Um, so she was really good with helping me through some of the really hard times, and just reminding you that they're always going to be there with you, but life still has to go on. Even though when you feel like everything else around you's just stopped, you still got to move on and be strong, because my mum would not want me to lie down and just feel pathetic about myself. And like, yeah, all my friends and family, same as Sarah, like me and my family are very close knit, and yeah, we have dinners and we see each other all the time. Yeah, it's quite lovely. So I'm quite lucky with the support I've had around me. Yeah, so it's definitely helped out a lot. And like Sarah was saying, I wasn't going around telling people that I see every now and then, oh, this is what's happened to my mother. Um, Obviously on Facebook and Instagram and all that sort of stuff, like people ask questions and all that sort of thing. So yeah, just really the close people around me are the ones that you have the chats to them about. Yeah,
Mm.
so
I think you made a really good point in that life still goes on, and that's one of the
yeah,
hard things to get your head around as well. And the fact that your loved one wouldn't want you to be sad
yeah,
it does
exactly.
make it, obviously it's still very hard. It's still very hard to this day, 3 years on. But it does help you shift your perspective, and it can help you deal with it in an easier is not the right word, but in a different way. And you do
Yeah.
get that time to have your goodbyes, and you know that that's what they wanted. And yeah, I think that that can help too.
Carolyn, we've had a couple of stories that have got some similarities, because Mitch and Sarah both had good networks and were able to have good conversations, it seems, with their loved ones. Is that your experience of most people you support through assisted dying, or are there some different stories you've
Yeah,
seen?
there's very variables. We've had people that have had their partners that don't want to know about it and won't even come into the room while you're discussing it, to women, people deciding not to tell one of their children because they've got a mental illness, they don't want to upset them, and keeping it private. I've had people that, one lady that didn't tell anybody, so they made out that she died in her sleep and was found the next day. So there's all different ways that people cope with it. I know in Victoria they even had someone that had called the police that said, this mum's about to be murdered, you'll have to come quickly, and they had to get the police had to take the daughter away. So there can be some complications if you don't have everybody on board and if you hadn't explained it to everybody. But not everybody's prepared. Many people aren't even prepared to talk about death, or do you have a will? I've had 90-year-olds I've said, have you got a will? Oh, why would I need that? I'm not dying anytime soon. So I think we still have a long way to go for our society to accept that death is just part of life, and we're all going there. And it makes it much better if we can actually accept that we're dying. We can live each day better, and also we have that opportunity to tell those that we love how much we love them. It's pretty sad when that opportunity is lost. And but there are, with VAD, there's people that are very much against it. There are doctors that are against it, oncologists. So when I ring up and try and get a prognosis assessment from various other doctors, some of them have I get some quite negative pushback about the whole situation. It's hard to know why they're so negative, but we do still get negative pushback from various people, other doctors and family members. So, which is sad.
Do you think that sometimes people have a conversation with you, a GP, about the end of their life before they've had conversations with family members? Or is that unusual?
No, they often do. They often do, especially when you're giving them a diagnosis. And when it's appropriate, I share some of my own personal information, because I think you can seem like someone that doesn't understand, because what would you know? How would you know? But I've had personally 2 of my children die, and both my parents die in palliative care. So I had that experience of going through grief, and I haven't had anybody I know personally having VAD, but I certainly have supported over 240 people now that have and done assessments for people going through VAD and been there when they've died. And it's certainly a very different death. I've I've found, than a palliative care death. That's the best that can be done, and they do a wonderful job when we work with people with palliative care services. But a death where someone has chosen, they've actually had the choice, is quite a different death, and much more peaceful, I found myself. Yep.
One of the things I think the Dying to Know Day movement is trying to encourage is for all of us to have conversations about what we'd like at the end of life before we get a terminal illness.
That's
That
right.
becomes more of a, conversation we're brave enough to tackle even before someone's unwell.
Mm.
Do you have any tips for people about how you might initiate a conversation about either to your loved ones, what they want, or, trying to talk about it yourself?
It's very difficult, because if people don't want to talk about it, they certainly won't, or they think you're being a bit hard or a bit too straight, or too cold about it. And one of the things I always do is say dying and death. I don't, that someone has died. I know people still say passed on, but to me that we're not, the person has died, and I don't find that offensive. But I think you can say things like, what would you want, like if you knew that you had a short time to live, what would be important to you? You can say that about many different things, because when people are deciding about what sort of treatment options there are and what they want to do, many times when people have cancer, there are various things that are offered. But if somebody knows, for example, when my father was diagnosed with cancer at 68, he was told that the chemotherapy is not going to give him more than a couple more months. So he just chose not to have it. So he chose not to have it, knowing he would be sicker. And he wanted those last 5 weeks of his life to be a time when he could say his goodbyes and organise his shed and his funeral, and mum, and my dad was a very organised person. So I think being able to talk about what's important to people, being able to explain the options, and working with someone to make those decisions. I see it as a doctor, it's a partnership with people, that you're helping, giving information, hearing what they feel, and then the conversation changes as things change with the person. But sometimes people are not always given all the information, or some doctors unfortunately don't know when to stop. I sometimes find that quality to me is much more important than quantity. There's not much point. I've had people going through that have chosen to have VAD. They've said to me, if I'd known that chemotherapy would make me so sick, I've had 5 months of my life where if I've been in bed, I wouldn't have ever had it. So being able to have those honest conversations about what's important, and allowing people to make the most of their last few days, weeks, months, years, is really, I think, really important as a doctor, to be able to help people do that.
Yeah, it's a really hard balance between, as the person trying to love and look after someone, you naturally want them to live as long as possible. You want everything done.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not actually really always the best for the person, what that person wants. And I think that one of the things that we are trying to encourage through our voluntary assisted dying work is to always think of the perspective of the person who's dying, not your own perspective. This is about what they want.
That's right.
Not about what we want.
No. I mean, some people respond badly because they feel let down if their mother or father or loved one says, I want to go then, I don't want to wait for that course. Why wouldn't you want to stay with me longer? Every minute is important, but that is, it's hard to be selfless, but at that time it's really important to think of the person themselves and what they're going through, and what they feel. It's good to be able for them to be able to do those things that they still like. I mean, one thing about VAD is that they know that the medication will be available in so many weeks. I say to them, what is it about life now that brings you joy? What can you do? What in your daily life, what can you do? Experiences you might want to have, people you want to see, the food you might enjoy. Think of those enjoyable things that you can do for these last few days, weeks. And of course, we know a third of people never take their medication. And it's just the fact that they've got choice, that they are able to feel relieved that they have a choice. It's in their hands now when they've gone through the process and got that medication available to them.
One of the other interesting statistics is about 50% of people start the voluntary assisted dying process and then drop out. And one of the hypotheses is that people are leaving it too late, that they start too late to become unwell. It's a long process. And maybe part of the reason they're starting late is because they haven't had good open conversations with loved ones about what they want. Do you feel that you do see better outcomes or different outcomes if someone has had good conversations about what they want, or are people able to pick it up pretty quickly at the end?
No, I think it's much better if they've had good conversations with everyone around them and they know what's happening and what they want. I think that's really important. People are more at peace. I've had families where I had one man who's had a son he hadn't seen for 10 years, and he reached out to him, and his son was actually there when he had the medication, and it was a lovely thing. It was lovely that they were able to settle their differences and to be able to say goodbye. You can't imagine how that son would have felt, that sort of grief that would be complicated by the fact that he hadn't been able to say goodbye and be able to reconnect with his father. So I think being able to do that is really important. I had one lady with liver cancer, and when I went to do a written, her husband said that she decided that she wanted to say goodbye to everyone that she loved beforehand, and he'd organised them all. So they had a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes each. And he said there'd been 51 people that had come and visited her so that she could tell them how much she cared for them and to say goodbye. She couldn't see the point of having them all coming to a funeral when she wanted to say goodbye to them while she was still here. So having the choice and being able to have that power to do those sorts of things. Some people do have parties. We had someone that had a big barbecue, and when the care navigators went round to his house, everyone was a little bit over the wind. You know, they had a few drinks and the barbecue and the pavlova, but that's what he chose to do. He chose to take his medication in the middle of a party. We've had people that have taken it alone. We had one man that wanted to save the funeral director some work and wanted to put his suit on so that when the funeral director came, that he would all be all ready. So there's lots of interesting things, and I think with talking about these sorts of conversations, it's not all doom and gloom. I think there's some humorous sides to it, and life can be quite funny. Even in death, death could be funny too. So yeah.
Mitch, your mum had a bit of a party, so you had a broad range of people around.
Yeah. So yeah, so it all happened pretty quickly. Like us finding out in a week, and then deciding we need to get a venue, we need to get this party going for Mum, getting all her friends, family, everyone we thought that would want to see her off, and she'd want to be there on her last night. And there probably would have been maybe 80, maybe 100 people there that came to see her off. She had lots of friends that had businesses, and we had food trucks, and we had a bit of a band and stuff playing there, and lots of drinks going on, lots of tears. But yeah, she sat there, and we just had tunes going all night, and she just sat there with a big smile on her face. And I'm not a very good public speaker, but I got up there and said a few nice things about her, and when I was a little bit of a rat bag when I was younger, all the things that she used to help me out with and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think it was really, really nice, because she was sort of at the stage where she didn't want to tell anyone. She's just so over it. She was just wanted to just give up and just move on. And yeah, I sort of suggested that, because I was like, come on, pull your head in. Like, this is what you'd want to do before you want to go. I know it's a hard time for you now, but you need to let all your friends and family know what's happening with you, because they'd be so upset if they didn't get to say their final goodbyes to her. And yeah, it was a beautiful morning. The next morning, we all got up as a family. Her sister was there, and her best friend was up from Gold Coast, and we all sat around, had a lovely breakfast, and had a few champagnes, and just put on some music, and then when it came to 11 o'clock when she was about to do it, we just put our favorite music on and just sat back and told stories about everything that we did with her and all the lovely things she did for us. So it was a really beautiful moment.
Mitch, thanks for sharing that. I could see smiles on people's faces. So it's a wonderful story. Do you think that it changed, conversations amongst friends that were aware of what she'd planned? Do you think there was more conversations about what they might do at the end of their life?
To be honest, I haven't really heard too much. I'm pretty lucky. I don't really have any people that are at that stage in life around me at the moment that are going through any illness or anything like that. But I'm sure it was definitely an eye-opener for a lot of like younger people that were there and my friends and all that sort of thing that didn't really know too much about it. And there's definitely conversations about, like, a lot of people there, they just thought, oh yeah, Jan's just having another party, like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's definitely one of the things that you talk to your friends and family about closely, not other people around really. But it's always out there for conversation. If someone asks me about it, I'd be happy to talk to them.
It's an interesting issue Mitch raises, Carolyn. When is the right time to have a conversation about what you want at the end of life? And the concept of advanced care directives are well known amongst some people, but probably not well known as they should be. What's your experience of advanced care directives and how good they are at helping people be clear about what they want?
They can be good, but it requires a lot of explanation because when you talk about the end of life and the sorts of things that happen, people have got this idea that resuscitation means that if your heart stops and somebody does CPR, you're going to survive and be normal. But in fact, it's actually quite an uncommon thing for people to survive having CPR, unless it's in hospital. And you need to talk about intubation, intensive care. There's all sorts of things that you talk about, and often people won't continue doing it because it's just all too hard. They don't want to discuss what if they became paralyzed or if they couldn't swallow, would they be fed through a peg? So it can be quite difficult. I think we should all have discussions about dying. None of us knows what's going to happen tomorrow, or when we get up in the morning. We don't really know whether we're going to be hit by a car or something. And I think it's one of the reasons why every time I say goodbye to my kids, I always say I love you, and they say I love you back, because it's at least that if something happens, they know that. And I think it's quite a good thing to think about your funeral and write some things down, no matter what age you are, because it makes it so much easier for everyone else that's left behind. At least they're not going to end up being guilty and spending huge amounts of money or doing nothing and not have a proper memorial. I mean, a funeral is so important, whether it's just a meal that you share together and talk about someone. It's much more important than a wedding, but we can spend 2 years organising a wedding. But a funeral, we're often pushed to organise it in a few weeks. And it's something I think it's incredibly important to be able to know what the person's life was like, and to be able to talk about and celebrate that person's life, to make meaning of their life and their death. I think that's really important.
Carolyn, one of the frustrations for people when they're learning about assisted dying is that you can't request assisted dying through an aged care directive.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a bit about why that is and what you do if people ask for it to be in an advanced care directive?
Well, you can put it in, but it's not binding, because, of course, you have to actually, to get voluntary assisted dying, depending on the state, but you have to have a condition that would lead to your death within 6 months. And you have to be competent. You have to be cognitively normal. So someone with dementia, for example, they can't give consent to that. And if somebody is approved for voluntary assisted dying and then they become unwell and confused, they're no longer able to give consent and no longer able to have it. So it becomes quite difficult. It's not possible in our system anyway to put anything meaningful about voluntary assisted dying in your advanced care directives. And even with advanced care directives, that can be quite complicated, and that people often don't have them with them when they end up in hospital. And instead they used your substitute decision maker, which is a sort of a step-by-step thing. So in fact, in most states, very commonly things are not done exactly the way the person would have wanted. The substitute decision maker says, no, I want you to do everything for mum, and they do everything for mum. So people, end up in intensive care when they didn't want to be in intensive care. So it's a very complicated, very complicated.
And it's the whole process of talking about your wishes at the end of life and contemplating assisted dying. It's not a simple conversation. I imagine it happens over many conversations. So starting, I guess, is the important thing.
That's right. It's important. And some people would want to live no matter what. They'd be like Christopher Reeve, paralysed up to not being able to do anything for themselves and still want to be here. And other people would want to be here if they were paralysed one arm. So it's a very variable thing. We can't really dictate for anybody what they're prepared to put up with and what they the value of their life, no matter what, is to them.
Yeah, what I've heard many times is when someone expresses their end-of-life wishes, sometimes the family members are quite surprised. So I think you can't assume that the people around you know what you want. And likewise, we can't assume we know what our loved ones want, what our loved ones want. So having these conversations is incredibly important.
I've just been at a death of a friend of mine with motor neurone disease. She came to see me for voluntary assisted dying the day before, and I'd spoken to her husband about the possibility of having aspiration. And the next day she had aspiration, and they rang me, and I went actually round there. And when she died, she was quite young. She was only 71. Her children and her husband had no idea what she wanted for a funeral. So we're discussing at her bed, even though she had this diagnosis for 6 months. They hadn't discussed it. They didn't know it. They didn't know any funeral directors. They didn't know about cremation until one of the daughters said, "Oh, Mum would have hated to be in a box. She's claustrophobic." So it was just being there, and because I was able to help them be there. It was a very important. I felt honoured, privileged to be able to support them in that death and to be actually there. But it was just one of those quirky things that I saw her the day before, and they had my mobile phone number and they rang me, so I ended up actually being there when she died. So, but it was just really brought home to me of how we just don't talk about it. Even when we know we're dying, we don't even discuss what it is that we want to, and it can be quite distressing for those people left behind, and because they want to do the right thing, they want to honour their loved one. Yeah.
So we've got about 15 minutes left, and thank you, Mitch and Sarah and Carolyn. It's difficult conversation, and it's interesting to hear, from a doctor's perspective as well, that it's, your patients are people that you're close to. You might even have to look after a friend, particularly if you're in a small country area. So it is really, it's a hard topic to discuss. I really, really appreciate your openness. I just thought I might share some of the questions that we're getting from the audience. One of the messages here is about the fact that the resounding thing they're hearing from the people on the panel is the value of choice, but also the value of having conversations early. They've said, thank you very much for your bravery in speaking out. But the question is, and this is probably for Mitch and Sarah, but in particular, the question was, do you think the voluntary assisted dying or the assisted dying process affected your grieving process at all? How about you, Mitch? Do you want to go first?
So
maybe Mitch didn't hear that. Sarah?
Oh, sorry. You can go first, Sarah, if you like.
Yeah, so I think it changed it for me because we were able to have beautiful conversations that maybe if we didn't know when Dad was going to pass away, we wouldn't have been able to have. Like, honestly, the vulnerability and the conversation that we had, I feel really lucky to have had with him. Like, we shared so many things, had so many beautiful moments that whilst I tried to have that when mum passed away, was very different because she was very, very unwell. So yeah, it definitely helped me. There was nothing left unsaid. My dad knew how much I loved him and vice versa. Like, yeah, it definitely helped. It doesn't mean that it's easy. Grieving is always going to be challenging, but it's definitely, yeah, it definitely helped, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd
which-
agree too. I think the grieving process, it's never going to be easy no matter what situation you're going to be in. But yeah, like Sarah said, being there with your loved ones in their last moments, that's really good. And I said a lot of things to mum in the last couple of hours and asked her like silly little things like, how do I cook this? What am I going to do? Like, who's going to win the state of origin? Blah, blah, blah. Like stuff that we'd always talk about. And there's so many things that I wish I could have asked her, but yeah, I didn't get around to. But I think, yeah, with the grieving side of things, I think it was hard knowing that that date was that was the time, that was the day that it was gonna happen. But it was inevitable. She was really, really sick, so it was gonna happen. If it wasn't that day, it could have been the next day, it could have been 2 weeks from there. You never know. So being able to be there with her at the end, hold her hand and give her a big kiss was really good. Yeah.
Carolyn, a question for you, perhaps. We hear about people using end-of-life duelers to support their loved one and themselves through the process of thinking about what they want at the end of life. But not everybody's aware of an end-of-life doula. And do you have an experience working with them? Can you explain to people who they are and what they do?
It's become more popular. It's a bit like a doula that you have for birth. It's a doula for death. So it's a person that supports you. There are courses available for, I don't know whether there's a registration, but there's big courses up at Byron Bay for doulas. So it's probably really what the women in a community normally did in the past, that we knew about death. It was a woman's job. Like the midwife helped you birthing, but also was there when you died and laid you out. They washed you and put you in clothes and laid you out and made sure your jaw was closed and you were grimacing. So it was part of that caring role. So it's the same sort of thing. It gets quite expensive. It's thousands of dollars, and I think you can do the same sort of thing. I think it's hard asked to become very close to someone and bond with someone at that time of life and develop that trust. I think if you've got some person in your life, it might be a palliative care nurse, it could be your GP, it might be just an older person in the family that has had experience, that it's basically just helping you through the process and showing you. If you've never been through a death, you don't know what you're supposed to do. You know, it's all a bit, it's over the top. But it is quite, as I said, it's quite an expensive process, and I think not well known about. But for some people, it would be very useful, I think. We would hope that the community, that we develop this community where we're all much more connected to people, and we won't need the doulas. We will be part of the community where people down the street will bring meals, where there'll be people that will look after your children, and you know, the sort of communities that we had in the past that we don't have now. We're a bit too isolated and not so much connected. I think connecting more in the community is the biggest thing I would like, to be able to support people through their whole lifetime.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, obviously people have been dying forever.
That's right.
So you'd think we'd know how to do it by now.
Yeah.
But there's the stigma associated with talking about death that just makes it really hard to bring it up. It's never seemed to be an appropriate time. And I think it's really easy to procrastinate and put the conversation off. And
we sanitize it. We put it behind the closed doors and we sanitize it. And people are not even comfortable about seeing a person dead. You know, a lot of people don't want to die at home because they have this strange feeling that they don't want to be their relatives to think about them being dead in the house. But in fact, when you buy a house, I'm sure there's somebody that's died in the house sometime. It's that complete not acceptance of death, which is very sad, I think.
Yeah.
I know in Ireland you still stay there upstairs, and people come and drink whiskey around and talk to you before you go off to your funeral as part of it. It's a wake that you're actually there and part of the community. So every different culture has different ways of managing it. But we've just been pushing it away for so long.
One of the questions that's come through was for you, Carolyn, which is, have you ever had a situation where you've got a family who's, you know, really not supportive of a person's wishes to choose assisted dying, and how did you deal with it?
Well, you really did. You're dealing with the person that's making that choice, so you don't. So it is lovely if you can get everyone on board. We've had people whose GPs aren't on board, whose oncologists aren't on board. So you can, all you do is work with that person. So you work with the person. Is there someone in their community that, or their friends that will support them, and work with that person? So it can be, you know, best friend. It might be their neighbour. With palliative care nurses that can support people. So you can't always get everyone on board, and I think it's important that the person themselves is in charge of what's happening, and that if you can't, you can't, and not everybody wants to be involved. I had one lady whose daughter's a doctor, and she didn't want to be there when Mum died. I was quite surprised and wasn't the contact person, and she didn't. So that there's different people in all walks of life and all professions that have got different feelings about it. We can't expect everyone to be on board, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's about respecting different views, but
That's right.
again, it comes back to that sense that you might have your own view, but this is about the individual's choice.
That's right. Well, that's what you would hope, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's not. Sometimes people think of themselves and not of the person that's actually dying.
We were talking a little bit before about the community support that we would love to see available to support families and individuals when they're planning for their end of life. And there's a variety of different resources around. I think in some places, the funeral directors play a really important role in the community of supporting people to plan and have a really big role in a community. And I've also heard really lovely stories about the role that death doulas have played to support people, and have not everybody does have a good friend or a best friend there, and they can really become a really important part for the family. But friends, family, palliative care nurses, even neighbours, postmen, you know, it's amazing who it is that comes out to support people at the end of life. And I think the important thing that we're trying to emphasise here is the need to start the conversations early, because in some respects that tests who might be there for you to support you, who is around and understands you, and who might be there to help you and your family. Mitch, your mum's wishes were pretty clear, and she sounds like an organised woman, and she had you all, you know, pretty clearly, you know, set in your ways about what she wanted. Had she really thought everything through in terms of not only how she was going to die, but you know, her funeral and afterwards?
So she never really wanted to have a funeral. So yeah, that was one thing. She didn't want to be standing there and people saying how nice she was and blah 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 and all this and that. That's why we decided to sort of do the wake the night before it all. That was just Mum's choice. She didn't want to have a funeral. So yeah, we just, if that's what she wanted to do, we're happy to oblige by what she wanted to do. Yeah, so.
Yep, fair enough. So we've got a question for you, and doesn't have to be a long answer, but the question is, could you please explain the process of assisted dying in Switzerland? So what was actually the process once you got there?
Sure. So we went there. We had lots of communication with the organisation prior to going, and that's where they I guess, assess your eligibility for my dad. There was a whole process of getting lots of paperwork and documents, and saying why in written form, why you would like this. So that was part of it prior to going. And then I guess you have like the pre-approval so that you can make the journey over there. And then once we were there, we met with the, I guess, leader of the organization, who was lovely, very, very warm. And yeah, so she then does like the proper assessment to make sure that you are eligible for it. And then they also helped us with a carer. So they provided a beautiful carer to help us, and he helped my dad over the course of a few days. And then the date had already been set. So, oh, sorry, that's something else as well. So that date you agree on, it's a crazy thing. I guess they give you availability. And yeah, and then we went to, it was, it's hard to describe. It was almost like a home setting. Like I thought it would be a very clinical hospital setting. It was a very comfortable home. And yeah, we went there on the day, and that's where it happened. So it was challenging to get over there, but yeah, I guess, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it's a brief. I think that
Yeah.
we're fortunate in Australia now in that assisted dying is legal in all states, and the ACT is not yet implemented, but they have a law passed. But unfortunately, there are still some people for whom they're not eligible but are still suffering and at the end of their life. And we do hear still stories of people travelling over to Switzerland. It's
Yeah, I mean, it would be a lot easier if it had have been available in South Australia at that time.
Yeah.
Whilst in saying that, we did get a really beautiful last few days as a family that we wouldn't have got in, obviously we would have got in Australia, but it was a very unique situation. But obviously very just uncomfortable being in a foreign city as well. Like if it was in our hometown, it would have felt a lot easier too. It was all very, very anxiety provoking and really hard. Yeah.
So we're coming towards the end of our time with the webinar, and there was still a whole lot of questions that I hadn't got to. The time flew. So Carolyn and Mitch and Sarah, you've been incredibly generous sharing your experiences with us and reliving some times that are perhaps not fun to chat about, but it was brave of you and really open and helpful for us all to hear your experiences, so we can think through how we would respond if we're in that situation. And we're really grateful. And Carolyn, your experience has been incredible. You're probably one of the most experienced assisted dying doctors in Australia. So your insights and I guess your just lovely, pragmatic, sensible approach to how people should think and plan for their end of life has been really helpful for us all. I did want to acknowledge in the last few moments that we have had quite a few questions about dementia and the role of voluntary assisted dying in dementia. At this stage, you cannot access voluntary assisted dying in Australia on the basis of a dementia diagnosis alone. And it is a very common question that we have, but we thought rather than try and raise the topic and address all the issues now, we might put together a dedicated webinar on the topic of dementia. So we feel it probably warrants its own time. So something to look forward for us all. But in the meantime, thank you, Carolyn, thank you, Mitch, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for all the participants for joining us tonight. Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you.